And thank you so much for being here. This is the award-winning Go Show. That's right, the award-winning Go Show. Gamey Fish gave us an award a while back, but yeah, I'm going to go ahead and we celebrate all things outdoors in this beautiful outdoor playground of a state that we live in. Jonathan Odell of Game and Fish is joining us, formerly known as the small game biologist.
No,
We know
not
him as the small game guy.
not
But,
not the. You forget, Mike. It's your
oh, that's right, your Arizona Game and Fish Department.
your small game biologist.
Your small game biologist.
Your personal
Here
one.
we go. No, I like to say the. It's kind of, when they're doing the intros in football, the University of Miami, the University of Arizona. Yeah. So, anywho, this guy loves cooking small game, big game, any kind of game. And we're going to talk about cooking because he's going to do some cooking demos out at the expo next weekend. You're going to have to stop by. What are you cooking at the expos?
I'm actually probably going to do I think each day one of the meals I'm going to do will be a fish, either trout or catfish, and then I'll do a game meal as well. I'm probably going to do some quail, and I haven't decided quite what the other game dish will be. But yeah, it'll definitely be fun. I want to. As you and I have talked, I can do like a lot of the crazy fancy, high-end Michelin star like on a plate, looks wonderful. And sometimes that's really for me, but I just love teaching people about how to cook game, and I want to make it easy and accessible to them. And just comfortable, something that you can, cook on a Tuesday night. Instead of the spending all day hours and hours using various techniques like I do on weekends and stuff like that. So
But it's important to do because to me that's still part of the hunt. Like
yeah,
when you pull that out of the freezer, that's still part of the fishing trip or whatever. When you pull it out and actually prepare it, that's the big cherry on top, the big bow on the gift, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely the most important part of the hunt, at least in my mind. I mean, that's why you hunted in the first place. I eat, therefore I hunt. And so,
Yeah.
to honor and respect that animal, at the end is through meals and sharing with friends and family and that kind of stuff. I mean, you want to pay homage to the animal because you not only harvested it, and took it from the field and all that, you know where it came from. I mean, if you and I shared a steak dinner right now, Mike, I mean, there's really no story. I mean, it's small talk and other stuff about life. But if I'm sharing an elk steak dinner with you, like it's telling the story of that animal and the hunt and the place and all that. And so there's an added component to that meal that wasn't there. Should we have just bought it at the grocery store? So.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people, the biggest barrier to entry is just, okay, how? And that's why I'm excited that you get to teach us because I've had your cooking. It's fantastic. I trust you cooking anything. I would unload my freezer and bring it to you just to have you cook it and I think a lot of people would share the same sentiment because it's kind of intimidating. I remember I was at my first offshore fishing trip and I brought back all this bluefin
Mhm.
and I had a little bit of albacore in there too. And it was fantastic. I had all this meat and I didn't know what to do with it. I was so intimidated to cook it, but then, because that's before YouTube and all that. And, you can't just jump on and find out how to cook something. And it sat for a while until I
Mhm.
finally got enough courage to go do it and not thinking I was going to ruin it. I think in people talking to people about cooking game, is that probably the number one barrier you hear?
Yeah, I think there is a big fear about, some people have a few like you have your one trick pony, like this is the meal I know I cook really well.
Mhm.
And you kind of you just stick to that and instead of branching out and stuff. And yes, I mean, you only get a limited quantity of whatever game every year. I mean, that's it for the year, and hopefully you get a tag next year and go back out and get some more. But
Right.
um they're fearful of screwing up part of that, in their cooking and trying to learn and along the way, of trying something new or different, and oh my gosh, I can't believe I overcooked this or I burnt that or whatever. There can be a lot of fear there, but at the same time, it shouldn't stop you, because that's what's cool. What's going on right now that's really cool in I think within the hunting community at large is this large. There's kind of a renaissance now of wild game cooking, um, that we haven't seen since the market hunting days of the late 1800s, early 1900s, where game meat was the cream of the crop in terms of meals you could get, in America. Now, we're not allowed to sell game and those kind of things, but every five-star restaurant in America today, in order to get that five-star, has to have duck on their menu, and that's a remnant from back in the market hunting days.
Really?
You have to have duck, yeah, and so, that was cream of the crop. I mean, ducks were the top end, wild harvested ducks, that were hunted and sold, through the markets to restaurants and things like that. So, I it's folks are really kind of stepping outside of their comfort zone, and we're getting to see game used in ways that it hasn't been for probably the last 100 years.
Yeah.
And in different ways. I mean, who would imagine using Arizona jackalopes, for Japanese cuisine? I mean,
Yeah.
imagine, what would another country or another culture use that ingredient? How would that, kind of show itself in their pronghorn antelope? I mean, in halal, or some
Wow.
tagines
Yeah.
or something. There's just really cool ways it's being used now. So it's impressive to see folks kind of using some of their talents and bringing in other things to really elevate game to the level on the table that it can be. So,
And you have the local vor tent you'll be demonstrating some things at next weekend in, but I do like that term. I think that term hit what, a couple years ago, probably
mhm.
pre-pandemic, and it's just kind of explain local vor and what that movement is.
Yeah, locavore is the idea of eating close to home. It's ingredients and everything that are grown, or raised, or live locally. And so, like I talked about, catfish and trout will be a couple of the dishes I'll be working with, and it's because those are two of the main fish that we stock here in the urban lakes here in the Phoenix area, but as well as around the state. Those are two really main species that you're going to end up finding and can catch pretty much, almost anywhere.
Yeah, right.
And using ingredients, you can find the Sonoran Desert is full of stuff. I'm not going to make you, trudge through the cholla bushes to find,
Ugh,
special berries or whatever.
thank
But
you.
very very simple ingredients that you can find at the store to if you caught a fish out at one of the lakes, you can bring it home and cook this dish. And so, something super easy, that's delicious, and hopefully folks feel like they're comfortable enough to be able to give it a try and do it. So,
They'll smell it. Let me tell you,
yeah.
they'll definitely smell the cooking, and they'll just gravitate right to you. And so let's talk about this. We got a couple minutes here. The term game, the word, excuse me, gamey.
Mhm.
Gamey, I think when you talk about outdoor cooking is a very, very bad word to me, and my family knows that. They know not to say that
Sure.
word. They just know gamey. To me, it was just it doesn't taste like a cow, it doesn't taste like a pig, and it doesn't taste like a chicken. We're gonna call it gamey. Game
Mhm.
should taste like what it is, right? Game should just
Exactly.
be what it is. Yeah.
Exactly. Here's what I think folks need to understand about, a lot of the meats that we eat as Americans: beef, chicken, pig, all that stuff. All of those animals, are raised to a specific age
Mhm.
before they're slaughtered. So they are all identical. Every chicken you get, at the store, precisely the same age. Every cow, same way. Every ribeye steak you get is from a cow that is exactly the same age. They
Did not
don't
know that.
harvest the old ones, all that other stuff. And a lot of times we use grains, to fatten up those animals before they're harvested.
Mhm.
And so they really have kind of blanded down. I mean, that's why folks kind of get all excited about grass-fed beef. If you've ever had a grass-fed beef steak versus, just a standard steak you get at the store, it has a little better flavor, it has a little better taste, but
Mm.
it's because it's taking on what it was eating out in the pasture, those grasses and things like that, into itself, depositing it in the fat layers and stuff, and it gives it a little bit of extra taste. Well, you know, elk, deer, squirrels, I mean, they're eating their natural foods out in the wild. And so, they don't have, the luxury of, grain,
Yeah.
corn
Hay
piles
and
there to
grain.
eat.
Yeah, right.
And they're also different ages. And so, there's a huge difference
Hmm.
between a mallard duck that was that you harvested this year, was born this year, versus one that's 6 or 7 years old. There's a little bit more strength, that muscle's been used a lot more, so it
Right.
could be a
Yeah.
little tougher. And so the Gordon Ramsay idea of a steak. Gordon Ramsay can tell you, okay, so many minutes on this side, so many minutes on this side in the oven, 350 for this long, and it comes out perfect every time. It's because the steaks that you're getting can do that. With wild game, the age of the animal comes into play, so many things, and so the time that it takes to cook something to perfection or where you want it
Mhm.
is different for every animal.
Right. That's
And it
amazing. I knew none of that. Well,
Yeah.
here's the deal. Jonathan Odell's with us. There's some Gamey Fish. We're have fascinating talk on cooking wild game. More coming up right here on the Go Show. Stay right there. And thanks for being here. This is the Go Show, celebrating all things outdoors in this beautiful outdoor playground of the state that we live in. I'm your host, Mike Russell. Joining us is Jonathan Odell, the small game guy at Arizona Game and Fish Department. And we're talking about cooking. And Jonathan just broke it down for us because he's a biologist and whatnot. He's a smart guy. Why the game tastes different than what we have in the store. And
Mhm.
so I just want to thank you for that because it's fantastic. If you missed it, you got to check it out on the podcast because I didn't know any of that. Did you have anything else to add on that? Because I kind of cut you off. We ran up against the break there.
Well, no. So, wild game is eating wild. And so it's there's a lot of different flavors that end up in there. And so when you think about our traditional pork, beef, chicken, those kind of things, they've actually over the time have become very bland. As much as you think there's a lot of flavor in that ribeye or whatnot you just purchased at the store, compared to an elk steak, there's almost no flavor.
Right.
it,
Correct.
and things should have their own flavor, to make it shine. But certainly, one of the things that I know, folks who want to cook game at home, what they tend to do wrong is they overcook it.
Hmm.
I don't know where it comes from, of like, wanting to cook the badness out of it or whatever. But no, those red meats, the redder the meat, the rarer it can be. And so as you're doing it, you definitely don't want to overcook it, and especially if you're sharing it with friends, because the hardest taste to forget is poorly cooked game. It has very strong flavors, and it will turn you off to it if you're just used to kind of the normal bland American diet. But when properly cooked, it's revelatory. It's like, holy cow, I had
Yeah.
no idea, that this could taste this good. And just having its own unique flavors, that add to it. It's kind of like folks, I think most folks have eaten turkey, um, the
We're
butterball straight
forced
out.
to. Yeah. We're
Yeah,
forced to once a
yeah,
year. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
Um, So you eat a butterball, but then you eat a wild turkey. I mean, it's turkey season right now, and those folks who end up harvesting turkeys, one of the cool parts about those turkeys, they're not as fatty, and so you kind of, they can dry out really quick, but they have more turkey flavor. That really good part of turkey, when you get that really nice, juicy piece of turkey, imagine that amplified, to a greater extent in a wild bird than in a domestic bird. Because they're eating acorns, they're eating, things out in nature and things like that add to that wholeness of flavor in that bird, and it's just a night and day difference.
Yeah. And that's
100%.
but then that's the term gamey. So let's talk about bacon.
Bacon.
Because everybody seems to wrap everything in bacon. I don't know if I've been to somebody's house that they're serving some part of game and bacon isn't a part of it. And I'm anti. I'm not a fan. I don't wrap things in bacon, but I guess it's snobby of me. Why are people wrapping everything in bacon?
Well, bacon serves a couple purposes. One, it actually protects the meat. So bacon is very fatty, and that's most game meat is very lean. And so as you're cooking it, if it's wrapped in bacon, that bacon provides like a layer of protection from overcooking or drying out that meat. And so it helps to add uh, that protection layer to it, but also that fat that gets into the meat as it's cooking, adds a little bit more flavor and stuff like that. And honestly, there's no one who doesn't like the taste of bacon. I mean, that's
True.
just there's a myth.
Amen.
If anyone says, they're just lying. Like
It's
bacon,
true. Yeah.
bacon is amazing. So um, it just complements it.
Okay.
But certainly, I don't know that you want it to overshadow. Like you want the meat that you've harvested to shine through, with its own flavors and things like that. I use a variety of fats in cooking wild game. I mean, duck fat, bear fat,
Mm,
butter. I mean,
yeah.
there are other alternatives to bacon, but I think everyone loves bacon, so it's hard to let that go. So
Now, Jonathan Odell's with us. He's from the Back Burner podcast, and he's a small game guy at Arizona, your Arizona Game and Fish Department. He's your small game guy. I'll get the yours in there later. Too. But I got to tell you, pal, years ago, you actually invited me, and I never took you up on this. So I'm going to say, because you haven't rescinded it, it's still a standing offer. I'm going to say
okay,
that you were talking to me about going out and just smashing some bluegills, and
yeah.
then going right in and making some fish tacos out of that. Are we in the season for that, or did I miss it again?
No, we're actually getting very close. Usually
Okay.
Memorial Day is my kind of the cutoff window. I like to get close to it, but not actually there. Mostly because, as you know, anyone who's been out in Arizona, Memorial Day, like everyone goes to the lakes.
Yep.
And so there's boats, I actually think it changes the chemistry of the water a little bit without the amount of sunscreen that ends up in
Oh, I can imagine.
some of the
Fuel,
waterways.
all that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, and so the fish act a little bit different, I think, once that happens. But yeah, prior to that, as we just start getting to the hot temperatures and stuff, a lot of the bluegills and sunfish, they're all bedding and sitting on nests and things like that. And it's an amazing. I go out, I catch a bunch of fish. I go out early in the morning, so right before it gets start getting too hot, catch fish like a bonanza, wrap it up, kind of mid-morning, go fillet all the fish and then go, make tacos for lunch and then I don't have any fish to take home and I got a full belly and dishes to wash and that's about it.
Okay, we're doing that. I'm seriously. I'm going to take you up on that. I'm inviting myself, but I'm not really inviting myself because it was. I'm going to call it a standing offer.
Yeah,
Cool.
for sure, for sure.
Oh yeah, we're gonna. Oh, I love that. Okay, so let's get back to that. Let's start to cooking fish,
Yeah.
because I remember when I brought that the albacore and the bluefin home. I remember the advice that I got was people have been eating raw fish for thousands of years.
Mhm.
Just don't overcook it. But there's
Yeah.
people that think like, oh, I don't know, I really have to deep fry this dang thing. It's the only way I can do it is to deep fry it. How do I get people away from deep frying things? It's like kind of the bacon stuff. How do you pull them out of that?
Um, uh, well, frying fish actually isn't a bad way to go.
Sure.
Overall, it's just a kind of a matter. There's a big difference between ocean faring fish and freshwater fish. Um, you know, uh, Freshwater fish are they're somewhat problematic, and I don't want to scare everyone out there at home, but they're more susceptible to parasites.
Okay.
That without it being cooked to temperature, can be problematic and have issues and stuff. So what I always recommend is hard freezing that fish before you cook it. Just to add an extra layer of protection to that freezing. As long as you can freeze that fish really hard for, you know, a, a number of days. I usually, at least 3, 4 days, maybe a week and stuff like that. It helps with some of that parasite load that would normally be,
Oh, okay.
like I wouldn't just grab a trout out of a stream and slice a piece off and just start
Just start
eating it.
chewing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
call. Yeah.
But there's a number of ways. I mean, as far as baking, grilling, grilling fish is a cool it's a really cool method that I don't think people use enough.
Mhm.
But mostly because the fish will stick to the grates and you're trying to flip it and
Oh, it's a
pieces
pain
are falling
sometimes. Yeah.
off and
Right.
yeah. But if you can start to master that technique, that's really like probably one of the most popular ways to cook fish in the world is just simply grilling it and stuff. But
And it would just
yeah,
use oil or oil the grates. How do I stop it from doing that?
yeah, definitely oil the grates. Or if you want, I mean, a lot of it, as strange as it sounds, I mean, a lot of countries actually use like banana leaves or to. to kind of steam it in, as
Oh,
far as a packet goes and stuff. You could just throw it in some tin, like the old hobo stuff back in my
yeah.
Boy Scout days and all that stuff, where you just
Heck yeah.
take your fish and
Mhm.
root vegetables and a little bit of seasoning, wrap it up, just a pat of butter, and throw it in the coals and let it cook for a while until
Nothing
it's
wrong with
done.
that. There's
Yeah,
zero
for
wrong with
sure.
that. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So, but there's, it's just, I guess what I want to get to, and I think you would back me up on this. This is Jonathan Odell, your small game guy from your Arizona Game and Fish Department, and from the Back Burner podcast. Go on there and check him out and get a get a feel for that. We're going to talk about that a little more in just a couple of minutes. But I think the bottom line is just kind of get over the fear. You're gonna have to. If you want to cook it, you're gonna have to at some point, and you might mess up. You probably will, but it doesn't mean that you're going to always mess up. You got to learn from it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think every cooking experience is a learning experience. As you kind of get along in cooking, I mean, I always try to learn from every single cooking experience. Okay, what should I have done here? What would have, once you start understanding the dials of
Mhm.
cooking and seasoning and those kind of things, once you can figure out which ones you turn to do what, it makes learning a whole lot easier. It's like, each time I cook something, it's like, okay, I got to dial that one back a little bit. I
Mhm.
gotta
Right.
dial this up some more. To get it the way that I want it to be in the end,
Yeah.
process and things like that. So
That's perfect. Jonathan Odell, your small game guy, and I don't know if you're the co-host or the host of From the Back Burner podcast.
the
Is it
host,
you?
the host,
Host. He's
it's
the
just a
host.
solo show.
We're gonna talk about podcasts. We're gonna talk about haggis, and we're gonna throw John a curveball. See if he can help me cook it. It's coming up next right here in the Go Show. Stay tight. And we continue with Jonathan Odell, the small game guy at your Arizona Game and Fish Department. He's one heck of a game cook. He's going to be putting on some seminars next week at Arizona Game and Fish Expo. And I said I was going to do three things. First, I'm going to talk about your podcast, From the Back Burner Podcast. Tell us about it. Why'd you start it? How's it going? What are we expecting when we subscribe and follow?
Yeah, From the Back Burner podcast started as an idea last year. I joined the Randy Newberg and On Your Own Adventures
Mhm.
production team. Randy asked me if I'd be interested in starting a podcast, and mostly because he enjoyed my company and thought I had good things to say and a different perspective than I think what's out there in the current hunting community.
Mhm.
There was a kind of a hole in the podcasting realm that didn't um, give small game its due, and also from the perspective of wild game foods and cooking, as well as hunting and conservation. And so that was really kind of the thrust of the podcast. I try to look at different people and things through a different lens, than what you're getting in the mainstream, which is where the From the Back Burner comes from. Maybe ideas and thoughts that have been sitting on the back burner for a long time, but it also
Yeah.
has the food connotation of being the pot simmering in the back of uh, you know, who knows what.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
um, I try to, give folks a different perspective and introduce them to different folks that they don't see in the mainstream, of what's going on in the hunting world and hunting outdoor media. So
And obviously, you're getting a taste of Jonathan Odell right now. See what I did with the taste
yeah,
of Jonathan Odell right
there you
now.
go.
So obviously, he's a super smart guy. He's funny. He's entertaining. He's engaging. You got to check out the podcast because I know I'm subscribing. So it's because I'll admit, Jonathan, I have 3 radio shows.
Yep.
I don't listen to podcasts because it's kind of like what I do. So
All
it's
right.
so, but I've actually gotten a little Steve Ranella with Meat Eater, gotten into a little bit of that and kind of enjoyed those. So I'm kind of thinking that's going to be the same vibe with you. But you are now going to be my podcast. So I'm going to be listening to my man. Just if you haven't heard his explanation of the word gamey, you'll know exactly what podcast you need to be subscribing to, and that is From the Back Burner Podcast. Now, let's can you explain, because before we jumped on the show, you said you had venison haggis. The
Yeah.
only reason why I know what haggis is the movie So I Married an Axe Murder. With that's the only reason I know what haggis is, and I'm Scottish.
Yeah.
So why? So tell us what haggis is, and tell us why this was absolutely mind blowing for you.
So yeah, I just got back from a 2-week trip to the UK. I hit all three: England, Scotland, and Ireland. in a 2-week time period, uh, part of the reason to go over there for me was hunting, but as well as take some cooking classes, learn some new techniques, sample food,
So cool.
just to add to my repertoire.
Sure.
And so there was some pretty traditional dishes that I wanted to taste, jugged hare being one of them, and um,
Jugged hare.
jugged hare, yeah, it's a
What is that?
traditional English recipe, where, the rabbit is the hare is actually served in a jug, along with, mashed, root we'd call it rutabaga, I think they call it Swedes over there,
Okay.
um, but, uh,
Do
but
you
yeah.
drink it? It's in a jug?
No, no, it comes in a jug because you load up your dish with the puree and bacon and cabbage, and then the hare, which is beautifully cooked,
Okay.
gets poured over top. It's
I'm
it's
gonna
really
take
good.
your I'm gonna look it up.
But
Take your word
but
for it,
yeah,
Jonathan.
in Scotland, I mean, Scotland, one of their famous dishes is haggis.
Yes.
And so for most people, it would turn their stomach to even begin to think about it. But most often it's done with sheep, but they do it with pig as well and all that. But it's taking a lot of the like the lungs, the liver, the heart, um, all of that, mincing it up really fine. Adding in some seasonings and other things, and then cooking it usually in the stomach.
In the
Um,
stomach.
yeah, they take it, they put it in the stomach,
Mhm.
tie off both ends. It's boiled for a number of hours, and then it comes out, and it's kind of a loose paste. That's
Sounds
served.
so
Yeah,
appetizing.
it.
A loose
Yeah,
paste.
yeah. I mean, it's granular, but it's something a little different. But it's really a traditional dish. But I found a restaurant that was serving venison haggis, and I was like, I have to go there. And this restaurant has had venison haggis on their menu for over 50 years,
Okay.
and so they got to be doing something right if it stays on the menu. But it was probably the most mind altering. I could not wait. I took the first bite, let it sit on my tongue. It was just blown away at how good it was. Like, I couldn't wait to get home. I'm like, I need every deer tag, every elk tag I can to try
Really?
and replicate this. Yeah, because it was amazing. Overall, I was surprised, but it really was probably one of the best meals I ate over there the entire time. So
That's fantastic. So it's basically a one and done. I mean, because you're dealing with all of those organs you're talking about. You chopping them up, mincing them up, and you have the stomach. So it's basically one deer is one plate of haggis.
well, haggis is usually served in small portions, probably
Oh,
about 1 or 2 ounces, about like the size of a shot glass. Generally, how it's served.
okay.
So you end up with several servings for several people or whatnot.
Got it.
But yeah,
Okay.
and then they have things like puddings. They call them puddings, but they're sausage, and they're made from all kinds of other internal organs and stuff. It's the whole idea of you never want to know how the sausage gets made.
Amen. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, very delicious. It's a different cuisine. I mean, I one of the guys I was talking to, we were laughing about, the problem. You could say this about the English as well as Americans. The problem with each of us is that we speak English. Um,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, because we'd be easier to understand each other if we spoke different languages, but
True.
we speak the same language. We don't speak the Queen's English, and so we have words that don't have the same meanings and everything else. So it's entertaining.
There was a movie I saw where the guy was in the UK. He's like, "You guys, you spawn the language, and no one here seems to speak it."
Yeah,
Okay, I'm throwing you a curveball. Jonathan Odell. He's a
here we
small
go.
game guy. He's a heck of a chef, and I really am gonna throw you a curveball. My man Rob Hunter.
Mhm.
He gave me for Christmas to cook with him a beaver leg.
Beaver leg.
Beaver leg. I didn't know such a well, obviously, beavers have legs, but I didn't know such a thing existed culinarily.
Oh
Can
yeah.
you help me with that, big guy?
Yeah, usually it's folks, it's the tail.
Oh, okay.
Beaver tails and stuff like that. But no, beaver makes a great meal. I mean, I might do them up like I'd probably do it up like carnitas or barbacoa.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
you know, um, good shred meat, lots of seasoning flavor.
So am I
Beaver
crock
has
potting this thing, or am I throwing this thing on a slow smoker? What am I doing?
I think if you wanted to add flavors and stuff to it, I might hit it like on a high temp grill. Maybe like over like live wood or coal or something, just
Of
to just
course.
just to get that outside some crust and flavor,
Hmm.
and then get it in a pot. Add some flavorings into the water, and just slow cook it till she's ready to fall apart.
Oh, I'm so excited. See, okay, I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to check in with you before I do it. So let's talk about this, by the way, and I will because I can. I've had that. I have your phone number. I'm name dropping.
Yeah,
So so real quickly here, this is a theory of mine, and it's going to be hard for me to not throw something on the grill because I believe that the sacred flesh that we take from the water in the fields needs to be over fire as God intended it. So I probably miss out on a lot of types of cooking that you like to do, John. But to me, I don't think I feel right if I'm not putting something, especially that I've harvested over flame.
sure.
Yeah.
No, so let's think about this from an evolutionary standpoint of man, right? Um, we are the only species that eats cooked meat, and the first way we did that was over fire. That's about as raw and primitive as you can possibly get. And then over the course of evolution, we needed containers to cook in, so pots, and then we started transforming raw materials into utensils so that we weren't just eating with our hands. It's kind of this progression as it goes along, and then different techniques form, and some of the best things you can possibly eat were accidents in the kitchen to begin with. I mean, and Arizona has the classic example of that in the chimichanga. I mean, honestly, that I know there's a big fight between the chimichanga and the Sonoran dog as Arizona's official food,
Okay.
but
Right. Yeah.
I love the story of a burrito falling in the fryer, and then the cook swearing in Spanish, which is the derivative of how it got its name, chimichanga. Um,
No way.
yeah.
I didn't know that story. See, this is why you go over and find from the Back Burner podcast. Real quick, I'm being serious. So how, because we got a couple seconds left. Where is it on? Is it on
Uh,
Spotify? Is it, what's that?
it's on any place you can find podcasts. Definitely type in "From the Back Burner" podcast. Add the podcast to it. There used to be a show that was called that before, but
Oh,
the show lives on Instagram. But there's also a web page. If you just look up "From the Back Burner" podcast, find the web page, or you can look it up on Instagram. Same title. It's all there.
Jonathan Odell, it's always fun. I want the rest of our conversations to be like this. I don't want to talk about cooking dove anymore like we've done for a bunch of times in the past. I appreciate you. I appreciate all that you do. I appreciate you adding to this show so much, so much. So from the Back Burner podcast, go check it out. He's Jonathan Odell, the small game guy at your Arizona Game and Fish Department. This is the Go Show.